So y'all know how I do. I just get right on in. It's been about 10 seconds. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about some very touchy things, right? We always do. And when I mean touchy things, I mean like some truth telling things. The last live I had to turn the comments off because I genuinely believe in the work that I do. I believe in the awareness that my content brings to certain things. I believe that even if, something doesn't resonate with the people in the comments, like cuz I'm also a bit of a pacifist when it comes to YouTube and content creation as well. So what I mean by that is like the people who typically resonate with things don't always comment. So that's fine. We show up for those who get it. And for the people who don't get it, that's completely fine as well, right? I tell people all the time, you don't have to stay of no place in the internet streets. All right. You are not forced to be here, but let's not waste too much time on that. And so I was actually making a podcast and decided I wanted to make a video. So, Nia Simone said very infamously that, to be an artist was to reflect the times. And if she didn't say that, I'm paraphrasing, right? And, that really stuck with me because I think when you start talking about social media, a lot of the truth of the world and the time that we're living in, it gets kind of etched out, right? Because you start to have what people believe is a confirmation bias, when really it's not really a confirmation bias as much as it's just we're living in a day and age where for the very first time we were actually given voice to the voiceless, right? Back in the day, people who were facing inequalities did not have platforms, right? They would typically have to march and rally together to get their voices to be heard, right? To get their petitions heard. And typically it was more on a common issue, right? We were typically battling against things on a statewide and federal level, right? So we weren't actually dealing with our day to day realities. But for the very first time, we were privy into the lives of those who were maybe disenfranchised or those who were experiencing inequalities in real time. And so a lot of what we like to think is a confirmation bias, it's not necessarily a confirmation bias. It's really just for the very first time, the voiceless have a voice, right? Social media does not discriminate, right? Before you had to have resources to get, billboards and push certain agendas, and you had to be well connected, right? Well resourced in order to have your voice and your petitions heard. But we're not living in that day and age anymore. And so, what we think is a confirmation bias is actually an outcry of the poor, right? And when we say poor, it's really just pretty much black and white today, right? I think at this point we don't have a middle class, right? We pretty much just have poor and those who are, you know, um, wealthy, right? And so, one thing I was thinking about, and I was listening to Big Think, and she spoke about religion. Now, she spoke about the prosperity gospel, and I don't know the name of her. I don't remember the name of the author, or I don't know if she's a philosopher. Big Think hosts a lot of philosophers on their platforms. I don't know if she's a philosopher, but what she said was very interesting. So she spoke about just how in the late 1900s there was this idea for a lot of people who were experiencing inequality. And there was this belief, right? She called it a religious belief, and we'll touch on that in just a moment, where basically all they had to do was follow a formulaic, right, subset of things that they could do essentially to improve their situations, right? And so really it was this belief that, if you could just, you see the books, right? If you think positive, right, and you'll change your life, right? How to have a perfect family. Those were some of the examples that she gave. How to be a better mother, right? So she gave all of these examples of how self-help culture, which was really formally, formatted, not formatted. What am I trying to say? Which was really constructed based on this religious belief that you could essentially think your way into a better circumstance, right? Because there was no way for a lot of people within the 19th century to really understand and classify the distinction, right, between the have and the have nots, right? Here, she gave the example, I believe it was New York, where you turn the corner and you're experiencing, right, the ultra rich, the ultra wealthy, but then you go the other way and you're dealing with a lot of individuals who are poor, who are impoverished, right? And there was no way to sort of like describe that level of inequality. And so people started to kind of gravitate towards this idea that we must be here because of X, Y, and Z, right? There's some type of individual choices that we're making or not making that has left us here in this situation, in these circumstances. And so I thought that was very interesting. Now when you talk about religion, and she quoted the book is actually called Prosperity Gospel or something like that. I thought it was very interesting because I think we're so quick to sort of like consider, quote unquote Christianity as a religion, but really a lot of the Western hemisphere religion is actually hijacked by Buddhism, right? So the self-help that she's talking about in terms of like this formulaic practice where you can just better your life by manifesting and thinking positively, which we're seeing today with a lot of people who may resonate with that level of spirituality and that spiritual practice, right? It is a religion, right? But it's actually not Christianity, right? We know Christianity prefaces on the idea of long suffering, right? Which I would actually say is a little bit more realistic for our, our present time and, within American society in general, right? It's really on the foundation of suffering, the suffering of African Americans. And so, she kind of just concluded by saying that, we could essentially all live more meaningful and happier lives if we would just learn how to kind of like suffer better, take the good with the bad. And that made me think about people who talk about suffering and the philosophers who kind of sit in very privileged positions, right? These are people who come from a lot of like Ivy League, elite institutions, even if they don't, well, we can't even say that they don't have an elite institution because they absolutely are typically coming from these type of backgrounds. And they talk a lot about suffering and the exploration of suffering, but they've never actually had to experience suffering, right? I think the only people who can really resonate with existential suffering are African American people. And so that brings me to today. And when we're seeing all these articles of women losing their lives, of wives losing their lives, although I am seeing, well, I'm not going to say it's just black and white. Well, it is black and white, but I'm saying in terms of what I've been seeing, I'm saying it's all women. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say it's all women who are experiencing death, right? Who are sharing abuse in all types of formats, which we talked about in the last live, right? In their relationships. And so I just always think it's very interesting when you have, white philosophers and people who are in very privileged positions trying to tell people how to suffer, how to endure, and how to live a more meaningful life when you've never actually been in that position, right? It's easier to kind of sit in a podium as a professor, right? Or as a New York Times, right? Best-selling author and talk to the poor and talk to people about, hey, listen, we have this inequality, but we should stop striving to make it equal, right? We should just understand that life is going to be unfair, right? And we have to learn how to suffer better. But that message to me, it just doesn't really land when it's coming from a person who has been in a position where they've never had to actually suffer in that way. And y'all know, if you've been studying the work of the Renaissance Room and if you've followed any of my previous works, I have talked about this for the longest of time. It's not just me, it's other African American scholars, it's other African American researchers, historians have talked about the importance of African American people getting back to their foundational roots in terms of community, right? Because we have never actually been privy to the gates of privilege, and it's always been a very exceptional few, right, that actually makes it out of these very impoverished, right, and disenfranchised communities and positions, right? You have a lot of people to this day, right, who you may look at, right? A lot of young people online have kind of shared these sentiments. And I know when I was young, I shared the same sentiments, right? You're thinking, I'm not going to be at a job for the next 15 years, right? I'm going to be doing other things, right? And you start to think, and kind of in agreement with what she was saying, like you start to think that so much of your life is in your hands, right? And so I always think it's very interesting when I think people critique the Christian faith, one, without really actually studying the theology, because it actually teaches you the opposite, right? It actually teaches you and helps you, have a more of a sound mind, right, as you're moving throughout the world, because you actually understand that you don't have a lot that's in your hands, right? But you kind of have an expectation that maybe all will go well with you, right? But it actually does not excuse suffering. And so I think it's always interesting when I hear the critiques in regards to Christianity as someone who actually practices the faith. It's never really quite black and white as they like to make it seem, right? It actually is a pretty good foundation, right? But you have a lot of people, of course, in the historical context of people using it to, lord over others. So it's a very powerful religion. We know it's very fully loaded contextually. But yeah, y'all. So I just wanted to come on here and say to my sisters, Don't have no more babies. Don't have no more babies. I'm telling you right now. And I know this was very far left, and maybe that's not what you wanted to hear from me. Maybe you wanted to hear something more positive. But I'm here to tell you right now today, because I'm just happen to see videos on my feed, and I'm seeing women, losing their lives, and just all the things. Um, when you start talking about living life and having a positive life or having a successful life, right? Um, and there's this book I'm reading. I literally just started reading it, y'all. It's called Shifting, and it talks about Black women and just, how we have to shift within society. It's very, very heavy. It's about 500 pages. I think it's going to be very rich and validating, right? But Black women do not have a fallback plan, right? I just listened to this 20-minute video of this young woman, I'm sorry, this elderly woman, and she actually spoke about raising her grandchildren, and she spoke about how tired she was, right? I think she mentioned like her son and just their estranged relationship and how he pretty much just went up on the deep end. And she spoke about how she has met so many other women who are raising their grandchildren, right? And before I get excited, because there's a lot of different avenues I want to go here, I want to stay clear in my point, and I want to just stay focused for a moment because this I'm very passionate about this. And I don't want to go off on the deep end. Black women do not have the luxury of risk, right? When you ask me what is the fallback plan for black men, well, black men have black women, right? Black women so often times are put against one another, um and the relationships can be complex. I don't think it's just like, we don't have each other as a fallback, but oftentimes we're coming together with very limited resources. It's more of a complexity, and I've always said this. I personally don't have all the answers to break down why this is, but I do believe that everybody benefits from the nurturing, from the support, from the advocacy of Black women, except for Black women, right? And there's actually nobody advocating for Black women. And so I say all that to say the decisions that Black women make will absolutely impact their lives, right? Um, White women don't have that same level of burden and sense of heaviness when it comes to decision making, right? Because they are protected by society, oftentimes protected by the people within our community. They have more opportunities for networking, friends, you know what I mean? It's just a completely different dynamic. And I don't really care where white women fall on the socioeconomic level, they are still well resourced than black women, right? And this starts off very early. You can see this in even some young black girls, right? I've seen it many times over, right? Young black girls wanting to go to college, wanting to do certain things, and already having to shoulder the weight of caretaking, already having to shoulder the weight of abuse, right, in certain experiences. And so it's just a very, very heavy existence. And I've critiqued many of my viewers and people who are on this page many times that we just don't really care to be insightful, right? Or to have insight in regards to Black women and our inner lives and the things that we have to deal with, right? When the community fails us, all right? I didn't say who, I said the community, all right? And so the thing about this American society, right, within our institution is that it does not protect us. So if you have children as a Black woman and for whatever reason, for whatever reason, your partner decides to take a red pill, all right, he might have been here today, he's gone tomorrow, all right, because that's just the level of fluidity that we're living in today. Social media has absolutely altered the minds of so many individuals. People are not in their right minds, all right. Um, there is no protections for that, right? A lot of times people will critique, women for not getting their children out sooner or not doing certain things sooner, right? But until you've actually been within the court system, it does, first of all, it doesn't even like you, right? It's already kind of coming at the situation with a little bias, right? But it is so, this cards are stacked so much against you, so that like you honestly probably aren't going to be able to protect your children. And so I say don't have children because I just think for many black women it is just it is not a circumstance that is just in your favor, like on average, right? On average. And like obviously you're going to be like, well, look at such and such. Yeah, I know, but like, she went to Howard, her husband went to Morehouse. Like that's an exceptional few, right? And although that is aspirational, it is aspirational. For many of us, that is not the storyline. And it does not matter. It does not matter if you were of the Christian faith and you did things the right way. It does not matter if you met him in the bar and you dated this man for 5 years. It just really does not matter. Right. Our motherhood experience is one that is just so fraught with like just heartbreak and endless responsibility. Like it is just a very, very sad thing, right? And I talk to you guys about this all the time, like Black women having to grieve reproductivity because we are just not given the same level of support, resources, and all the things, right? And you already know that, right? We talk about the Black maternal health crisis, and just all the things, right? By the grace of God, like there were Black doctors in my city. And but for many women who are in Utah, like it's not that. And we're not hearing about it as often as we probably should, which is why there's a lot of researchers today who are really advocating for Black maternal health. But the violence is going up, and that's really what I'm saying. The violence is going up. The court system does not protect you. It does not protect you. Um, it is not for you, right? It does not see you as a victim. It does not see you as someone who is trying to be a good parent or whatever. It sees you as a stereotype, right? It is quite frankly disinterested in your history and the context and all the different things, right? There's a book by Dorothy Roberts and it's called Torn, and it talks about how, Black children make up the vast majority of children within the foster care system, but there are fewer Black children in American society than there are white children, right? And she spoke about during just, health screenings and things like that, and how, white women essentially their children weren't being taken for them depending on certain health screenings and drug testing and all of that, but Black women children were. And this was more specifically in regards to like the crack era. And we're not obviously making excuses for drug abuse, but there were some women who were essentially explaining to the doctor that they were struggling with addiction and they weren't given, treatment. Their children were just simply taken away from them. And the numbers of children that were taken away from their parents, their mothers rather, it was like hundreds and thousands of children during this era, right? And she spoke about how even once these women went to treatment, they were clean 2, 3 years, they never got their children back. That was not the same for white women, right? And like I think the reason why as Black people we are so blighted by the injustice in this country and the continual institutional racism and all of our just horrific experiences, right? And the reason why we can't stand in arms and have a clear understanding of our plight here is because we are so distracted by like entertainment. And back to what I was saying about, this idea of like the prosperity gospel, which is not necessarily an originator of Christianity, right? Actually, if you read the Bible, there is no promises of riches, right? But it is a practice of Western society, which is a more spiritual Toltec type of practice, which is essentially to say, hey, if you manifest, if you meditate, if you align yourself, if you put a vision board out there, right? Like you can bring these things into your life. And so that's what I'm talking about. And so you have a lot of people who have tried to, say, hey, I'm just going to forego Christianity, which is fine. You do what you want. But you try to gravitate towards this very old belief that like America is all about what is it? What is the most infamous book? It's not even infamous. This book has like millions of copies sold. It's not the law of attraction. It's like I can't think of the book. I actually have a copy of it. It's The Secret. The book is called The Secret. Yeah, and so like a lot of people will start to gravitate towards that and think like, and you have a lot of podcasts that are geared towards Black people that are really just about like being rich, right? Being rich and, how you can get into real estate. And a lot of them actually have this same type of foundational belief, right? And that's why they get a lot of attention. And so you have a lot of people today who like in the community real time the violence is increasing, people are really crashing out and women are bearing the brunt of this, right? But like when you go online, you know what I mean, you have all these people who have this like these type of platforms, and then you have Jay-Z and you have like and it's like all you need to do to get rich or to get out of your situation is just to do X, Y, and Z, right? And so these principles and these ideas are very historic and it's not anything new, but it doesn't actually work. It doesn't work. So I don't know. I guess I'm just more so saying when it comes to back to what I was saying about the last live, like when it comes to male violence, when it comes to children, and when it comes to the lives of Black women, there just aren't enough protections for you to really enjoy motherhood. Like it literally does take by the grace of God. And a lot of people like to say, well, this Judeo Christianity and all this different stuff. Let me just say this, okay? Um Much of what we have in regards to historical context in regards to Africa, right, and their spiritual practices and the things that we may have originated from is all mystical, right? It depends on who's telling the story, but I'm going to be honest with you, there just is not enough scholars who are well researched in regards to our history, which is ongoing, right? It's still relatively new. And in regards to the practices, like historical practices that I think took place in Africa, that's like a well rounded, you know what I mean? To really say, "Hey, this was the practice," because you have on one end, some people are like, "Yeah, there's Miriam and there's like the Black Pope, and you have the children of Israel, and you have all of that." And then on the other end, it's like we don't really have anything else. You know what I mean? So it's really all mystic. But I say all that to say, um, I just think it's interesting because you talk about black people gravitating towards like this white god, but then it's like it was Nat Turner who led the slave revolt, right? And actually learned to read and teach black people, hey, listen, no, in the Bible it says we're supposed to be free. You know what I mean? So it's just like I don't know. I think it's always kind of been up to interpretation. I understand Desmond Tutu. I understand the colonization of Africa. I'm not saying it was never a book that was used to weaponize our freedom and clearly enslave us. But at the same time, I just think there's a lot of historical context that's missing. And I know for a fact, as someone who used to practice this sense of like spiritual religion that's more as like Indian and Buddhism, right? It doesn't protect you within American society. It does not serve you to be thinking overly positive and continuously optimistic about certain things. Like you have to be able to see the world for what it is. And I just don't think it's a practice that can really be practiced within American society. And that's because I don't think that the origins and the foundations of it was for American society. Like that type of belief of like everything is good and everything is going to work out and you just got to be positive. That's originated in like India. You know what I mean? Like those are not our practices here within this country. So I'm not really sure what those customs are, but if people walk around and it's like, all brotherly love, that might work for them. But here, you need to know there is an enemy, whether you believe in the devil or not. You need to know that we are not all in here like kumbaya. You need to be wise, innocent as a dove, wise as a serpent. So I don't know, y'all. I don't want to be cynical about anything. I'm not here to be cynical. I'm just more so here to say, like, we gotta be real because when the violence occurs, the first thing we tell black women is your fault. You did this. You was doing this, and that. You wasn't doing this, and that, and you could have prevented this, right? And so, like, I don't know, y'all. I'm just here to say, like, it's just to the point where there really is nothing that protects us. I think motherhood, more specifically, is such a vulnerable experience that like you need protection, right? We just like you should be protecting the women and the children, but they're not being protected today. And I think about how many black kids are now being ushered into the foster system, right? Foster care system. You're talking about abuse. You're talking about a generations of young people, right? Generations of children growing up in the foster care system. Like this is crazy. You know what I mean? This is crazy. Being raised by whoever, wherever, doing whatever to these kids. And it's like, oh, well, you know what I mean? That there is no protection. We don't have no protection. So I'm just saying, hey, listen, girl, I know you want to still believe in the fairy tales and you want to believe in the prince and you want to believe in the one that's coming to save you, but I don't know. Girl, I don't know if he coming. I don't know if he coming, girl. I don't know if he coming. Yeah, I agree. It is the physical and the spiritual for sure. So yeah, that's all I wanted to come in here and say. You know, we are really entering a time of like the survival of the fittest, and it's not just about like a lack of communal regard or not sharing resources or anything like that. It's more so like this administration is turning whatever systems and whatever resources that were in place to help people who were disenfranchised because it's founded on equality, right? Like all of that is about to be gone. You know what I mean? Like, you talk about the power of choice, there ain't gonna be no choice. You ain't gonna have no choice. You know what I mean? That's not being cynical. Like, I think it's really being realistic. Like, I will never forget, like, I was watching the news, and when I seen that Trump was elected, I just automatically felt sorrow in my spirit. Like, I just knew it was up. I just knew it was up from there. Like I just knew. You know what I mean? And it's just crazy because you have so many people today, especially like these young white advocates and these Hispanic advocates. Like I don't want to hear it. I really don't. I really don't, friend. I really don't want to hear it. I really don't. Like this is the cost of racism. And now they're doing very slick things. They know many of us don't have the type of understanding about our government, right? From the jargon to all the things, right? Gutting the Voting Rights Act, like, hello? You know what I mean? They're really setting it up to where there ain't gonna be no more of this like no, it's slow. It's slow. And I think for me it's like, you're grateful that like people who, may not be impacted by this in their day-to-day lives are advocating, but I also just think at the same time, like, I don't think that's what I want to see no more. Like, I want to see people who are privileged do something. You know what I mean? Do something. Like, I don't really want to keep hearing about, like, I just don't. Because I feel like as a collective, like the vast majority of people who do step out of their like racist communities, you know what I mean, who do start to advocate, I feel like it's still a vast majority of them who are standing 10 toes. And I be experiencing racism in my day-to-day life. I was literally walking yesterday and this white girl and this girl, high rise plushed, girl plushed. Okay. She yelled something down, said something. It was just something just so like, why would you even say that? And what would make you sit up in here and these girl apartments is all of start at 3,000 a month? Like what reason would you have to say something to me? What reason would you have to say something to me? And it's like I just be seeing a lot of people just out walking. Y'all think the solution is just get with white people. That is the just do the interracial. That is the solution. Just give with white people and we can just get free. I just don't understand it, honey. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I think it's like, you should have an attitude like we until we all free, none of us is free. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, they are asleep at the wheel and they don't care because it's not impacting them. It's not impacting them. I'm talking about children being put into the foster care system. I'm talking about mothers and other children experiencing abuse because it's really rampant. And we know this, right? Domestic violence increases whenever there's like economic strain. Like we know this, right? And so that's what's happening today. Why do you think this manosphere talk? It's not just, oh, these men are just misogynistic, right? That's what people who don't actually experience the violence, who are not byproducts of that type of violence, that's what they say. Baby, this ain't no misogyny. This is a right away passage for these men to be beating up on their wives and their children. Some of them are offing their wives. And I know you think that this is not alarming. Maybe because it's the format. I don't know. I don't know. I know clever girl reads, and everybody got their preferences. I'm not a poe. I hear y'all, and I'm not here to say what you should or shouldn't do. I'm not here to say what you should or shouldn't do. I think it's a very somber thing, as a black woman who wants love and to be treated like a woman. But I think there are some of us who have just been through the fire and not necessarily are like bitter, but have maybe accepted this reality and maybe don't actually want an alternate reality, right? And I think that's maybe coming from, being chosen and the emptiness of it and the danger and just all the things. So I understand it's not something that everybody can relate to. I also don't, I'm not trying to project onto anybody, but I do think a lot of the burden that black women have had to endure is to constantly conjure up like fairy tales and constantly conjure up the idea that like it's going to happen even for generations and generations it hasn't happened, and the only solution that we're oftentimes given to for the women that it hasn't happened for is that they're bitter, that they're too this, too that, too light, too dark, too black, too. So I just think for me it's just more so like, I don't know. I don't know, but I also know it's not for everybody. You know? I think until it's, like, really cost you something, honey, I don't know. But I'm not here to say because there are people who are happily in those situations? They do, clever girl. They do. I mean, they do seem happy. That's why I say, like, I don't think that this work of like advocacy, like, sometimes I think it can be very isolating in the sense that, like, not everybody can relate to it. And I tell you guys this all the time. Like, I think it depends on where you are geographically, what type of experience you're having as Black women and Black men. Like, if you're in LA, DC, you're gonna be looking at me like, what is she talking about? You know what I mean? Like, if you're in a space where there's ample resources, ample opportunities, like, you're not gonna have these experiences, right? Everybody that is around you has some general, knowledge. There's some level of, like, emotional intelligence. Like, you're not gonna be having these experiences. You're not gonna be able to relate to this level of, like, just like, you're not gonna be able to relate to that. Like, you're not gonna be able to relate to people who are like, yeah, my son is like, like the lady that I seen on the video. You know what I mean? So I don't know, you know? I'm not here to say what you should and shouldn't do with your life. I'm just here to say count the cost, right? I look at those stories that we like to think are a monolith, right? There was a content creator who came on TikTok who shared how she was a Christian and, she waited, did all the right things, right? And she ended up being a single mom. She was crying, and she was just talking about, like, her experience or whatever. And people were just like, see, well, this is why, like, the church is this, and it's like we don't like to look at the relational dynamics that are very prevalent, and it's not even a matter of a one-off anymore. And I think there is a good thing to have this sense of naivety, and I don't think it's about projecting onto anybody, right? When I was young and I had that openness, right, I remember when there will be women who would try to tell me what I'm saying to you, not you, but, like, in this live, and it would be like, I'd be looking at them like, oh, they better, they whoop de whoop de whoop. But then you get older and you live a little. You know what I mean? You live a little. I agree about having us at odds. But I do think it's time to acknowledge that Black women have been the only one carrying that burden of unity in regards to Black men and Black women. Like, I think there was a moment in time where Black men were wearing shirts that said, like, protect Black women and, like, I love Black women. Like, that was a very brief moment in history. But whenever Black men are economically disenfranchised, right, or they feel like priced out, that's when the violence occurs. And typically Black women are the brunt of that. So I don't know. I don't actually think that on average, I can't say that I think Black men sit and think about how to unite with Black women. I don't think that that's at the forefront of their minds. It's almost like a toxic relationship where I think Black women are constantly trying to figure out how to be in partnership with Black men, how to be more of X, Y, and Z or whatever else type of formulaic, you know what I mean, thing they need to be in partnership with Black men. But I don't think that Black men on average are sitting around really trying to figure out how to unite with Black women. Why are we so divided, right? Like, there are very few Black men content creators, and obviously not every Black man is a content creator, right? But there are some Black male content creators who do this work and who will be calling Black men out, on certain things. Like, I think his name was Conscious something, but he was one content creator who kind of, but it's like it's so few and far between. He actually got a lot of pushback too. Exactly. But the sad thing about it, it's not just like on the surface, women were taught romance and men were taught strategy. It's that women were taught how to love, and Black men and men in general. Let me not say Black men because I know that's a trigger word. Men were taught how to take as many of us down. So it's not just a matter of, oh, men know how to vet, men know how to no. Right? Men were taught how to use, how to be destructive, right? How to take as many of us down, how to take us for what we got, how to be the nice guy until you get what you want, right? Like, that's the thing that's so insidious. And very seldom are any men coming out talking about how, man, listen, let's be honest about the conversations that we're having about Black women and Black bodies, right? What's really going on here? Why are we taught this? I remember when my uncle said X, Y, Z. No, they're not. Because they're benefiting from it. Because if you don't have the tools to really enter into a healthy relationship with a Black woman, right? Many of us are educated, not even just because we love education, but we don't have a choice but to be, right? Black women making decisions in American society, if you make the wrong decision, it can cost a lot, right? Our mistakes are not just mistakes, it is incredibly consequential. Right? You know how many Black women have never recovered from the things? You know what I mean? And you can even see this in terms of being, parents solely to our children, right? You don't get the grace of, oh, it just didn't work out. No, it's you are dumb, right? Your children are disgraceful. Your kids ain't gonna be nothing. You ain't gonna be nothing. Like, you see what I'm saying? That you even think about in dating, right? What happens when, even, and I hate to use celebrities, but I know that's a primal focus. Whenever a celebrity couple breaks up, right? Black women are really, really like held to a very, very high. Even if there was any case, right? Kiki Palmer, I don't even want to use celebrities, but I just think about all the black women who are in entertainment who have had these very, disappointing or, abusive or whatever relationships. It's never on it's never a joint failure, so to speak. It's like it is a direct attack on the identity of black women, and that absolutely shapes how we treat and relate to black women. I can see that. When you say that too, like the larger presence of black men groups on YouTube who had that focus back in 2007 and 2012. I can actually see that because those people are married and partnered and their kids are healthy. And they're typically the ones who may comment and be like, well, no, I don't agree with you. And it's like, no, it just was a different time. So please understand that this is the racist belief, right? And I think this is why when we hear these conversations, our first thought is to attack rather than to engage culturally with the reality of our dynamics, right? The racist belief that is that black men are inherently violent, right? That they are inherently flawed, that they are inherently right and abusive or whatever, right? Insert whatever derogatory remark, right? That's racist, right? The reality is that many are socialized to be violent. Many are socialized, right, to destroy women in the communities. Many are socialized and sometimes rewarded, right, for this sense of overt violence, right, or emotional. I mean, we talked about the different levels of harm. It's not just physical. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes it's mental, right? And so, yeah, that's we have to get that understood. And so I don't know. I just think, when something is going on within the black community, we never really seek to address it. We never really seek to address it. And I think that's why we have what took place, right? The gutting of the Voting Rights Act, because we're never on the same page. Our relationships have always been a means of entertainment. For the vast majority of people. You know what I mean? And that is the space in which we're relegated. So we spend so much time going back and forth here instead of really like being able to talk about things and be productive in our conversations. So there you have it. And it's interesting because I think when we start talking about the solutions for black women and like what do we do when, as much as we want to be optimistic about love and relationships, black women are experiencing harm. Right? Disproportionately. It's funny because you will, maybe attack a black woman who says, "Hey, let's call this out." But if you listen to any sound black men, right, from that era, right, of consciousness who are healthy and esteemed and partnered and maybe economically well or at least stable, they're going to tell you don't date those guys, right? They're going to tell you leave it alone. Like, you know what I mean? So I just think it's interesting when it's like we're all thinking it, we're all saying it. I mean, but few of us are actually saying it, you know. Well, I want to be honest. I think for many black women, and I think this is the rarity, because I think that our strength is just something that is like we have to garner this level of fortitude that no one else has. But for many black women, we have to be just undeniably strong, like crazy, crazy strong. And so when people are always trying to kind of solve the dating dynamics in the lives of black women, I think it's really kind of like maybe there's a sense of apprehension, right? To accept the fact that like we have to be so incredibly strong and we are the only women who have to make peace with like self-love being enough. You know what I mean? Self-love being enough. And we have to like, there's a reason why so many women are like, no to marriage, no to more kids, or no to kids. I'm going to focus on my career. There's a reason why black women were pushed out of the workforce. There was a reason why women with quote unquote degrees are attacked. Like, there's a reason for all of that. You know what I mean? And so it's like if you can take away the rights and the freedom, and I know we hear this a lot from white feminists, but like if you can take away the rights and the freedoms of women, they don't have a choice but to depend on the very men who get a sense of power, right, from harming them, from controlling them. You have to understand that. Yeah, clever girl read. That's not in our favor. It's not in our favor, and that's why I think it takes. I hate to say this. I hate to say it. I think it takes putting your big girl panties on to just acknowledge that, like, we don't have the same reality. And that's why I do the work that I do. And like I said, you don't have to accept this as your truth. I think this is a very hard pill to swallow. You know what I mean? But like, we don't have the same reality as Black women as other women do. Right? Other women, it's pretty much cut and dry. You want to get married, there's a cultural expectation for marriage, there's a cultural expectation for mutual respect and all the things. But for us, it's just like, honey, I don't know. Yeah, violence is an inevitable component to the male experience. Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. If you say it's the job of the elders and the elders aren't doing it because the elders also didn't have that level of experience with mastering, then what do we do? What is the solution? Because women are afraid. Let's put all of the intellectual. Let's put it all aside. Women are afraid. Women are not just, oh, I hate black men. No, women are afraid. Women are afraid. Women have paid the price many times. Women are left with the shambles. Women are left with the responsibility. Women are left with the burden of putting their lives and their children's lives back together when the violence occurs. And there's no solution for it. Even in 2026, we still don't have a solution for it. And if the solution is there, men aren't taking it. You know why? Because not even just black men and black women, right? Not even just on that level within this society. All right, within American society, patriarchal society, men are they're using their free reign in terms of violence because they know that there's no consequence. When there's no consequences for how you engage with like violence and how you enact that violence on the lives of people that, trust you, that you should be entrusted, you know what I mean, to provide and to protect for, people aren't going to stop. Have I so let me think about this. Let me see, clever girl. You said do it. I think black women are afraid enough, actually. I mean, we don't hear about it a lot, but a lot of that checking out that black women are doing today in regards to like relate like that's why I always see like so many black women who are just like living their bestest. They're doing their lashes. They're doing, you know what I mean? Like the girlies are putting themselves up and the girlies are like, "Hey, I'm done." Like, that's the alternative, right? Like, that's the response in fear. We're not sitting here shaking and trembling because I think we know that no one's coming to comfort us, right? It's more so like taking advantage of our free will. We have the opportunity to learn. We have the ability to learn. It's like, let's get in a position to put ourselves up, put ourselves in a safe environment. You know what I mean? And let's move accordingly. So I do think black women are afraid enough. And I think the result in that is them disengaging. And that's what you're seeing today. Have I experienced men that I felt safe around? I think I did, like, growing up, and I actually had a very positive outlook on men. Um, I had a very because I didn't feel sexualized by black boys growing up, and so I was really able to connect with them in a different way, and that set a foundation for me to where it was like growing up, I felt like I was able to relate to men in just a very like relational type of way, you know what I mean? And that opened the space for like friendship and trust and safety. And then I experienced like betrayals. And then it was like after, I was the byproduct of whatever conditioning they had been taught, right? As I got older, and that made me realize like, oh, men are not your friends. Men are not safe in that way. You know what I mean? Um there seemed to be like a common theme and a common thread where I just felt like a continual disregard, I would say. And so, yeah, I just kind of noticed the pattern. And then there were other women who were sharing that similar disregard that they were experiencing. And then fast forward, you enter into religious institutions. And then you also start to realize, like, just everything that kind of governs, right? There is no safety. And so, yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing, clever girl. If that's a nonprofit, that's a really good nonprofit. And I want to be clear too, like I do think you start talking about agency. I mean, you do have to kind of like, especially when you start talking about free resources, like it does get like, okay, we have to kind of make sure that we're, in that space. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So, I don't know, y'all. I don't know, Fran. I don't know. Listen, I've just seen so many Black women bear the brunt of this community, of our community. And I don't know. You know, I think in terms of love and relationships, though, I think you guys have to find people who can speak to that, right? Just because my content may not resonate with the ideal like fairy tales of Black love, and it may not be that particular representation, doesn't mean that this perspective is invalid. You know, are there people that I think can gravitate towards it, for a myriad of reasons, right? Some because of understanding, right? But I don't think that the answer or the solution is to say, hey, we need to pipe down on these conversations, or we need to silence these conversations, or hey, we need to talk more about Black love in this way and relationships in this way. Like, no. You know what I mean? It's very real. And I think if you haven't been somebody to experience that, then I just consider it a privilege. I think in all the ways in which we talk about Black boys and criminality, I think relational violence and harm is a byproduct of certain environments as well for Black girls, and not everybody kind of makes it out. Do you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, I think the ways in which you kind of, it's not a crab in the bucket. It's more so about the environment that a lot of Black people grow up in, and some of us make it out of these environments and we don't have these type of experiences with harm or crime, right? Some of us do, though, you know what I mean? And so if that wasn't your story, then I think that's okay, right? Like I'm not here to invalidate that, but I'm also here to say, hey, listen, this is not everybody's experience, and we can't keep trying to like make it. Well, I don't think it's about solutions. I'm not going to say it's not about solutions. I kind of gave my opinion on the solutions, and I don't think y'all wanted that. I'm just saying that there is awareness that I like to bring on this platform in regards to certain things. And I'm not the only one. I think that with me maybe being a little bit more interactive and it being y'all know how we do, we just go live, you know what I mean? But there are a lot of content creators who talk about this exact same thing. And I think a lot of people resonate with it. They're just bigger and more optimized for SEO. There's better aesthetics, right? Maybe shorter and more scripted and more like organized type of formatting, you know. Um, yeah. So I'm not cynical about anybody, but what I am saying is that, some of us do choose to engage with the victims of violence. Some of us choose to engage with those who really are in impoverished communities. And I know that, like, every time we think about the poor or whatever, like, so many of us, especially those who are on this live and who may be viewing this type of content, you're so removed from that you don't realize that it's still going on. You don't realize that it's still happening. You don't, you may not have been a byproduct of that. You may have had a single mom, but you didn't experience your mother being abused, right? You may grew up in the ghetto, but you went out. You know what I mean? You made it out without these type of experiences affecting you in your life, right? It's similar with like gun violence, right? Not every Black boy has had a friend who has lost his life through the gun violence, right? And so we have to be mindful when we talk about these things. I know it's a very, very sensitive topic. I know we want to liberate the people. We want to bring together Black love, Black unity. All right. But this page specifically is more so just kind of addressing some really hard truth. So, um, and I think for me personally, it's incredibly dishonest to overlook that and disregard that, especially when the only band-aid that we're putting up on it is saying, hey, Black women need to choose better. That's crazy. And that's where we are today. So I don't think it's unique to the Black community either. And I think that's why I try to be more clear when I speak. Like, I'm Black and there's no escaping that identity, right? That the identity politics of Blackness just because of the color of my skin. In my first mind, I actually came on here to talk specifically about women being abused and women losing their lives in these relationships because of this growing manosphere, right? That looks like misogyny on the surface, but really what you have is this cultural acceptance, right? right? Today, of all these men kind of rallying together to encourage violence, right? And you think that it's just this very secluded online platform or this very secluded online community with men just typing in the comments. No, these are men who are abusing their wives, who are taking their lives, who are hurting their children, right? And I'm just coming on to say, hey, listen, there's no protection oftentimes at a state level, right, or a federal level for this. So women need to be careful. That's all I was saying. Well, they do have things like, the sex offenders list, depending on where you reside. So there's that. There really is no safety. And I think we have to be mindful about that too, because I'm not swinging the pendulum here. There's a lot of harm we're not going to be able to, because that's just life. Like we can't put borders around everything. And you know what I mean? We just can't do that. There's no way to stop all the things. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I do think in terms of just kind of like being aware, like, oh yeah. Oh, well, a lot of kids today are being homeschooled. A lot of kids today aren't even going to school. So that's a tricky one. You know what I mean? That's a tricky one. I think a better or a more realistic approach maybe wouldn't be an app, but to more so get kids together in the community, right? And this is why too, like the perspective that I give so often comes from being in community, like real time. You know what I mean? Like I'm not someone who is sitting far off on the outside saying, "Hey, how do we help women and children? How do we help poor black kids?" Or, "Man, I had this bad experience with a black man and I seen this letter or this newsletter or whatever on CBS and this is what's going on." Like, no, that's not the type that's not my framing. So, to answer your question, I think a more like effective approach would just be to get kids together in a community, maybe put them all in the same t-shirt and create some type of group where they walk together to get on the bus together or something of that nature. And then most kids who are living outside of like that type of community where they can't walk to school with other kids, more than likely I think that they are probably being dropped off by parents. So, it's not everybody. Yeah, I mean, the manosphere, of course, there are some guys in there that are not, but I'm more so saying, when have we ever seen men talk about women so vile, right? In this way that sort of normalizes this level of disregard and it's incredibly dehumanizing. And then we simultaneously are dealing with a lot of men who are insecure, right? Which breeds that sense of violence, right? And then you have this online platform that's sort of like normalizing calling women out their names. Like that type of violence just escalates. So it's never just language, right? It's what you're feeding your mind, which then for many men, I believe creates a level of impetus to harm and enact violence. So y'all know these conversations can go for a long time. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but yeah, I just, I don't think it's about living in fear. I don't feel afraid to exist in my life. I don't, by the grace of God. But I do think that women need to be careful today. Because like I said, social media just it's not just altered the brain like algorithmically in terms of what we see, but it's altered the brain in terms of what people are being fed and what people are hearing and seeing from influencers or people that they may look up to who have money, who are spewing hatred, who are spewing this level of normalization of harm. And women, on average, what I'm seeing are the byproduct of that. I mean, most people are traumatized. You know what I mean? It's white kids in the foster care system. I just was looking at the article with the white man who's like running in the woods right now. He's on the loose because he literally, I don't know if he killed his wife or tried to kill his wife. So it's not just, there's a myriad of reasons why I think things are the way they are. But I'm just more so here to say, hey, listen, let's shine a light on this. Let's not turn a blind eye to this because I think that that would be very negligent, right? As a creator, as a creative, as Nina Simone said, as an artist, to not reflect the times. So that's all I wanted to say, right? I personally, I think when you talk about advocacy, I think it's about seeing, hearing, doing, observing. I don't think it's just about like sitting there idle, doing nothing, and pretty much twisting the narrative and seeing what you want to see. You know what I mean? Like no, that's not what that is. So the truth is not always pretty. The truth does not always include every person who's that I'm not saying, hey, every person is doing this. That's not what I'm saying. And y'all know that. Okay, I gotta go.